All right, so we are going to talk about what we did in class today, and this is going to cover a little review on selecting and masking, and then going into layer styles and going into layer adjustments, and that's about it. Maybe a couple little things thrown in here or there, but that's about it. So you should be able to use this to reference how to do a lot of the things you need to do. So let's get into it. First off, I've brought in some of these images here. You can see in my layers panel. Make sure you have your layers panel open if you don't have it open yet. Make sure you have that panel open. I've got an image. I called it cousin because you can name it whoever it is. Your brick wall. This is so that I can show you how to mask her on a textured background. And I'm also going to show you some different effects, which you can kind of see are applied here. This is a filter applied here on my layer above that, and also an adjustment layer in order to select things or just to adjust your layers. So we're going to look at all those things. First off, let's start with selecting and masking. In order to show her hair here, since it's so curly, we want to make sure that we cut this out so that you can see through all these little holes to the background. So this is a quick review here on how to do that. I am going to use my quick selection tool or my object selection tool here. Object selection tool, if you're in 2020 version, you can kind of grab over the general object in the layer and it will see it, but you see what happened here. It did not see it because I was selected on the wrong layer over here on the right-hand side. So I'm going to deselect, Command D, and I'm going to select the correct layer. And I'm going to go back and try that again using my object select tool. There you go. Now you see it. It does a pretty good job of seeing that object. If I say Command D and deselect, I can also try using a quick selection tool. This tool has the adjustments like a brush. Next to the letter P, I can use my bracket keys, and I can make that a bigger brush, and I can just kind of come around here and drag to generally get. Although I think the object selection tool in this case might work slightly better because I'm having some trouble down here. All right, so deselect, Command D. You also have a last choice here, which is new and pretty great in most scenarios, but not all scenarios. So I'll give it a try. It's called Select Subject, and it's up here at the top of your screen. And if I make sure I have this layer selected, and I'm going to say Select Subject. And it's going to think about it for a little bit. And look at that. That is pretty great. I'm super impressed. And that's because this particular image has a plain background. So it's pretty easy for it to select the different values. If it's a more complex background, you're going to have a much more, a harder time just selecting your subject. But let's go ahead and go with this one because that's a really nice selection. And I'm going to go into the select and mask mode now. So go ahead and click that. And it's going to show me here my mask. And I'm in the view mode here at the top of overlay. You can pick whatever one you want. You can see what your mask is going to look like. Look at how detailed that hair is already. But we want to get that even more detailed because if you look in the overlay, you can see right in this area of her hair, you can still see through to the other color. So let's do a little bit more fine tuning here. We're going to look at edge detection. I'm going to leave that alone. We're going to look at smooth, feather, contrast, and shift edge. Smooth, I'm going to leave that alone. I do not need to smooth my edges. I am going to feather it just a little bit, maybe like a pixel, just to kind of soften up those edges a lot. I did show this in class, and let me show you one more time. If I was to maximize this feathering option, you can see what happens here. Oh, that's super crazy. Let's go halfway. You can see how fuzzy the edge is when you feather a lot. I would really not advise going that much feathering because your picture is going to paste like really, really like poofy because it's going to have super, super, super blended edges, and you want to have a little bit of definition there. So I'm just going to feather it a little bit, just like 1 pixel. Leaving my contrast alone and shifting edge. That would be if I wanted to have a border around her, which I don't. And last here, output settings. I want to always, I'm suggesting this for our class, always use output to new layer with layer mask. It gives you a duplicate layer with a layer mask on it once you push OK. But I'm not ready to push OK yet because I want to refine these edges just a little bit more. So I'm going to use this tool over here on the left-hand side. Looks like a hand holding onto the tool, the little paintbrush. It's called the Refine Edge Brush tool. And you can push R to get to that when you're in this mode. And I'm just going to make this brush the size that's so that it's enough to kind of half go on the hair and half go on the background. So I'm just going to kind of run this along my edges and in some of these little areas that it didn't quite get when it did that original selection. And you can see it's really working well because the background, the original background of this image was a solid color that was a very different value than her actual hair. So it was pretty easy for this computer to see those different values. Okay, I'm much more happy with this now. And now I'm going to say, okay. And you can see here that when you zoom in and you look into these little spots, I can actually see through, if I use my move tool here, to that brick wall behind her in all those little spaces of her hair where you can see through it. So it really works really well. I want you to take advantage of this. I want you to play with this. I want you to try this. And you can see here in your layers, what that did is it gave me this extra duplicate layer with a mask, okay? So that is the select and mask option right there. And I can always go back into this mask and use my paintbrush and go back in and make more adjustments if I need to, okay? Because that mask is there, all right? And the original is still there if I needed it, which I don't, but it's there. Okay, next thing. How do I apply a filter to this image, okay? Filters can add texture, can add really crazy effects to things on your piece, all right? I want to add a filter. First thing I need to do, and I realized this as we worked on this, is we originally set these documents to be CMYK for printing purposes. Well, filters don't like to work in CMYK mode, so we are going to have to switch our mode back for the time being to RGB, and then we will switch it back before we turn it into CMYK. So this actually provides us an opportunity to really quickly see how to use some of these other kind of settings here. So if I go up to the word image at the top of my screen and I go to mode, I can see here, now I've already switched this one. I want to put it into RGB and 8-bit channel. Those two settings right there are going to allow me to use my filter gallery. So that's what you want to set it at for right now. But the other thing to check out in this image drop-down menu that's super handy is image size. This is going to show you, oh, my pop-up window down here, it's going to show you your width in height in inches or whatever, unit you decide to set your document at. But it also tells you right here your dimensions in pixels, which is really handy if you're ever turning in a document for a contest or anything like that where you need to say submit, or maybe a t-shirt design and you need to submit and it says this document cannot be larger than say 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. You can always drag it into Photoshop and just really quickly look at the image size to see what your pixel dimensions are. Just a little handy tip to know how to do that. I'm going to say cancel on that. All right. So now that I have set my image mode to RGB and 8-bit, I now can go into the filter menu and go to the word filter gallery. And I'm going to click that and you'll see what happens. It pops up this pop-up window here. I'm going to zoom out and over a little so you can see right now my whole this girl here. Let's zoom out. Here she is. Now this mode is, I can't tell what I'm in here, halftone pattern, but I'm going to click on say Conti Crayon or something. Or, oh, guess what? And I hope you guys can see this. What's happening here? Why I can't see her face and I can only see this outline is because, I'm going to say cancel. Over here in my layers, I was selected on the mask. So it was showing me a filter on the mask. I want to filter on the actual image. So I click on her first. That was actually good that happened because I'm sure that's going to happen every once in a while to everybody. Click on the girl first, then go to filter gallery. Okay? And here now you can see, if I zoom out, that makes a lot more sense. There she is, and she's in halftone pattern. You can change your pattern, size, contrast. You can open up all these different windows and try all these different things. And just be careful, because when you are using a filter, it is a large adjustment to your file, and it can make your file lag because it becomes such a large file. So be careful by putting on an effect. You might want to wait to the end to put an effect on. I am going to leave it halftone because I think that's really cool. Make it bigger there and say, okay. One of the other things to note is that this is in black and white. Anything that's in these envelopes that are black and white are going to apply a gray scale to it. But I'm going to say, okay, here. One thing to also note is that over here on the left-hand side, I am in black and white mode right now. So if I was to change this and say, change my color to red and white, now if I was to go into filter mode, let me change into a fresh one here. If I was to go into filter mode here with red and white set, you can see what it does is it uses red and white instead of black and white for my image. So check your colors over here first before you go into those modes if you want to apply a different color with that filter. All right, now, next thing to talk about, that's filters, and you can play with those. Next thing to talk about is, what if I wanted to blend this layer into the background layer a little bit differently? Layer blending modes are right here in your layers panel. So make sure you have your layers window open. Again, you go to window and layers if you don't have it open right now. And I select this layer, and I just right here, so easy, I just click on the word normal and I can now pick between any of these choices. And there's a lot of really cool things you can do with this. So keep that in mind. Excuse me, play with that. Have fun with that. All that great stuff, okay? So you can make this have some really, like, make it look like it's kind of like etched into the brick wall. That one kind of. So that's how you use the layer blend modes. That is really, really simple. And then the last thing I wanted to show you guys was adjustments. All right. So if I'm just turn this off for a second and turn her back on, one way you can use adjustments is this. So here's in your layer panel, if you're at the bottom here and you look at this half circle, it's half white and half black or gray, and you click on that, it's going to give you your options for adjustment layers. Right, you have all these choices here. So for example, if I pick levels right now and it's going to apply it, oh, hold on, cancel. I'm going to go back. I want to select this layer here, and I'm going to select my adjustment layers. I'll say levels, and I can play with the levels. I can like make it darker or lighter. If I change my mind, I don't want that one, I'm going to undo that particular layer. Let's try a different adjustment layer. Maybe I want to change my color. Maybe it's a little too orange or a little too blue. I can go color balance here, and I can play with the color balance. But one of the things, I'll put this on like a major color like there so you can really see what's happening here right now is that this layer that's been applied is an adjustment layer. It has been applied to everything below it. So you see, if I turn her off, it's also applied to that brick wall behind her. In most cases, you are not going to want to do that. I want you to know how to apply an adjustment layer only to one layer, the specific layer that you want it on. So if I only want to adjust her, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my cursor, which now looks like a little hand, okay? I'm going to put that right on that line that splits these two, okay? And it's like right there on that dividing line of these two layers. And I'm going to push Alt. Now, this is on a Mac. I'm pushing Alt. On a PC, you may end up pushing Control or Command. Just push all three buttons and see until you see this symbol right here, okay? It looks like a square with a downward pointing arrow. That, once I click, you see what that did? It applied this layer by putting this little arrow here. You can see it's applied to only the one below. You can see that the one behind it now is not affected by that filter. Only this layer here right below it is applied and affected by this layer. Okay, I can double click on this layer little icon and go back in and make more adjustments to that layer, whatever, and it does not affect that layer below it, only this one. Okay, again, that's hovering on that split line. Push Alt so that it splits it here. And I don't want to unlink it. And you can unlink it or apply it or non-apply it, whatever the word is there. You can by clicking that button. Okay. So now it's only applied to her. So that's how you do that. And if you change your mind later, you can just delete that layer. That's why you want to use adjustment layers instead of actually applying an adjustment directly to the layer, because then you can't take it off. So by having an adjustment layer by itself, you can always go back and adjust and move things around. Now, one of the last things I want to show you is this, and this is what I showed in class, is one of my students wanted to use this image here and just take the clouds out. But what was happening was the clouds were so similar to that background color that it couldn't select the clouds individually. So we used the help of filters for that to do something like this. So by taking this image, I'm just going to delete this one so you can see it. Taking this image of the clouds, I'm selecting that layer, and I first want to put an adjustment layer on it. I'm going to say levels here, and I want to say apply this directly to the cloud layer, and I'm going to make this layer super drastic, like crazy drastic, just so that when I go to select my clouds now, if I use my quick selection tool and make this a little smaller, and I go to select my clouds, look how easily it can see the differentiation, right, between the clouds and the background, because now they are so drastically different than the background. They're very, very, very different in value. So I can go through and just kind of generally select these. I can always make more fine tunes later, but I say go through and select them like that. And then, one more here. Then what I'm going to do, I don't want that yellow, so I'm going to negative by pushing Alt, go negative back up there. Okay, now I am going to mask that I've selected. So I'm going to put a mask by clicking this button right here, add a vector mask. Oops, wait. Nope, deselect. Command Z. I want to put the mask on this layer. So I'm going to put the mask here. And you can see what that did if I turn off everything else. There I have just masked off my clouds, okay? Now that looks pretty rough, right? I can go into the select and mask layer and I could feather it a little bit and say, you know, make that feathered a little and then say, okay, it softens up those edges. And now the last thing I want to do is just take that filter off and take off this adjustment layer. So I'm going to delete this adjustment layer. And look at that. Now I've got my clouds selected and they are back to their original color and they are selected in a lot better or easier than it would have been if I had tried to go through there without adjusting those levels first. So now I have that layer and I can, you know, lay some cool clouds on top of my image and do some really cool things with it and keep playing, keep playing, keep playing, keep playing, have fun. And I will see you guys later.